I'm so excited to share that after all this time, Mom has finally agreed to move away.
But I didn't agree.
Wait, what? She never agreed.
Oh, no, I never agreed.
Mom, what are you talking about?
We're gonna miss you, sister. But it was a unanimous decision, Pastor. I will take the chairperson position.
Mom?
What are you doing? You can't be here in October.
Watch me.
I was still holding my coffee when my son stood in the church fellowship hall and announced that I was leaving Cedar Ridge. Mom finally agreed. It's time, Ethan said, smiling like the decision belonged to both of us. It didn't. Within seconds, people were hugging me goodbye, asking about my new life near Knoxville. Across the room, Lauren caught Ethan's eye and smiled. That was when I understood this hadn't started today. I didn't argue. I walked to the Fall Festival sign-up table, picked up a pen, and wrote my name beside festival chairperson Rosalie Carmichael. The festival was in October. According to my son, I'd be gone by September. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever had someone make a life-changing decision for you without even asking, tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if stories about family betrayal and finding your voice mean something to you, please like and subscribe. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. By the time I put this pen down, Ethan was staring at my name as though I had written it across his forehead instead of on a volunteer sheet. He didn't say anything immediately. That was what unsettled me most. My son had always been quick with words. As a boy, he could explain away a broken window before the glass finished falling. As a grown man, he had turned that talent into a successful sales career. But standing beside the fall festival, looking at my name beneath festival chairperson, Ethan seemed to have misplaced every sentence he had prepared. I gave him a small smile. Then someone touched my arm. Rosalie. I turned and found Patty Bennett beside me. Patty and I had been friends for 27 years. We had buried husbands within 3 years of each other, delivered casseroles to half the congregation, and spent more Tuesday mornings than I could count drinking coffee at the same diner on Main Street. There was hurt in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? My stomach tightened. Tell you what? That you were moving. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Behind Patty, the fellowship hall continued buzzing. Folding chairs scraped across the floor. Children ran toward the cookie table. Someone laughed near the kitchen. It was an ordinary Sunday morning. Except apparently, everyone knew I was leaving town, except me. Patty, I said quietly, who told you? Her expression changed. Ethan. When she hesitated. About 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. I looked toward my son. He had moved across the room and was speaking to Lauren in a low voice. 3 weeks ago, Ethan and I had eaten dinner together at my kitchen table. He had brought barbecue from a place outside town and complained about work while I packed leftovers for him. He hadn't said one word about me moving. Patty lowered her voice. I thought maybe you just weren't ready to talk about it. What exactly did he tell you? She looked uncomfortable now. He said the house had become too much for you. My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. What else? He said you didn't feel safe living alone anymore. I stared at her. I had lived alone for nearly 6 years since Thomas died. I changed my own furnace filters. I paid my bills. I drove myself to appointments. I volunteered twice a week. The previous winter, when a storm knocked a tree limb onto my back fence, I was the one who called the insurance company and arranged the repair. I had never told Ethan I felt unsafe. Before I could answer, another woman approached. Carol Whitmore had attended Cedar Ridge Community Church longer than I had. She hugged me. I'll miss seeing you in the third pew, Rosalie. I barely managed a smile. Apparently I'll miss it too. She laughed, assuming I was joking. Ethan said you're ready for a simpler life. I don't blame you. These big houses become such a burden. There it was again. A story about me written without me. I glanced around the fellowship hall differently now. Mrs. Patterson had already told me Knoxville had excellent doctors. George Mercer had asked whether I needed help packing. Someone else had mentioned an estate sale. Those comments hadn't seemed connected when I first heard them. Now they did. Ethan hadn't made one careless announcement that morning. He had been preparing people, for weeks, maybe longer. I set my coffee down because my hand had begun to shake. Patty noticed. Rosalie, you didn't know about this. I knew Ethan thought I should consider downsizing someday. That was true. He had mentioned it several times since Christmas. But there is an ocean between saying, maybe someday you should consider something smaller, and telling an entire community that your mother has already agreed to leave her home. Patty's mouth tightened. That isn't what he told people. Before I could ask more, Ethan appeared beside us. Mom, can I talk to you? Patty looked at him. I saw something hard enter her expression. I think you two probably should. She squeezed my hand before walking away. Ethan gestured toward a quiet hallway near Pastor Michael's office. I followed him. Lauren remained behind. Once we were alone, Ethan exhaled. What was that? What was what? He pointed toward the fellowship hall. The festival. I volunteered. To chair it. Yes. In October. I know when October is, Ethan. His jaw tightened. Mom, you're making this unnecessarily complicated. There was that tone. Patient. Reasonable. The tone adults sometimes use with children when they believe the discussion has already been settled. What exactly am I complicating our plan? I looked directly at him. Your plan. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, please, we have talked about this. We talked about you thinking my house was too big. We talked about you worrying because I live alone. We never talked about me agreeing to move. You said you'd think about it. Yes, and I've been trying to make it easier. By telling people I made a decision I haven't made. His face softened slightly. I didn't want you dealing with 50 emotional conversations once everything started happening. I almost admired the logic. He had taken away my choice so I wouldn't have to experience the inconvenience of explaining my choice. How considerate. Don't do that. Do what turned this into something ugly. I studied my son. The little boy I had raised was still somewhere in that face. I remembered sitting beside his hospital bed when he broke his wrist at 11, teaching him to drive in the high school parking lot, Thomas slipping $20 into Ethan's hand when he left for college. That history made what was happening harder, not easier. I am not turning it into anything I said. I'm trying to understand why my own son has spent 3 weeks telling people I'm leaving Cedar Ridge. His eyes shifted away. That tiny movement frightened me more than anger would have. People ask questions, he said. So you answered questions I hadn't answered myself, because eventually we're going to have to do what's practical. There it was again. Eventually. Have to. Practical. Not once did he say what I wanted. I folded my arms. Where am I supposedly going? We'll discuss that tonight. My eyebrows lifted. Lauren and I found a place near Knoxville. It's nice, Mom. Really nice. Independent living, activities, transportation, people. Your age. Stop. He did. You found me a place to live. We found an option. Does this option know I'm coming? Silence. That answer was enough. I felt something inside me go very still. Ethan stepped closer. Just don't make decisions out of spite. Like volunteering at my church, you know what I mean. No, actually I don't. He glanced toward the fellowship hall and lowered his voice. Take your name off the list. I stared at him. Why? Why? Because people will depend on you. They've depended on me before. Mom. Say what you're trying to say. His frustration finally broke through. By October you won't even be here. The words hung between us. Not might not, not probably won't, won't. My son sounded remarkably certain about the future of a woman whose permission he had never obtained. I looked past him through the open doorway. From where I stood I could see the Fall Festival sign-up sheet. My name was still there in blue ink. Rosalie Carmichael. For the first time that morning, it didn't feel like a volunteer signature. It felt like evidence that I still existed, that my calendar belonged to me, that October belonged to me, maybe even my future belonged to me. I looked back at Ethan. Then I suppose October will tell us which one of us is confused. His expression changed. Not anger, worry, just for a second. But I saw it, and suddenly I understood something that sent a chill through me. Ethan wasn't worried that I might embarrass him. He was worried that I might interfere with something already in motion. I picked up my purse. I'm going home. We're coming by tonight. Why we need to talk about the next steps. I walked past him. Behind me, Ethan said, "Mom." I stopped but didn't turn around. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. I stood there for a moment listening to people laughing in the fellowship hall. Then I walked outside into the Tennessee sunshine. All the way home, one question followed me. If I had never agreed to leave, why did my son already have next steps? Ethan and Lauren arrived at 7 that evening carrying a glossy blue folder. I saw it before I saw their faces. Through the screen door, Ethan held the folder against his chest, while Lauren stood beside him with the careful smile people wear when they are about to tell you something they have already decided you should appreciate. I opened the door. "Come in." Lauren hugged me. "You okay?" It was such a strange question after what had happened at church that I almost laughed. "I'm fine." Ethan walked directly to my kitchen table and placed the folder beside the bowl of peaches I had bought the day before. "Can we sit down?" I remained standing. "You said we needed to discuss next steps." Lauren glanced at Ethan. He opened the folder. The first thing he pulled out was a brochure. The cover showed two silver-haired women laughing beside a swimming pool beneath the words Willow Creek Senior Living, Knoxville, Tennessee. I looked at Ethan. "What is this?" "Just look at it. I can see what it is. Then give it a chance." I sat down because suddenly I wanted to hear everything. Ethan began turning pages. "They have independent apartments, a fitness center, transportation, organized trips, meals if you want them. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this place. This place, my house." He sighed. "You know what I mean." I did. That was becoming the problem. Lauren pulled out the chair opposite me. "Rosalie, nobody is trying to take anything away from you." That sentence made something cold move through my stomach. I hadn't accused anyone of taking anything. Not yet. Then why did everyone at church know I was moving before I did? Lauren looked at Ethan. Ethan leaned forward. "Because we've discussed this for months." "No. You discussed it. I listened. You said you would think about it, and apparently you decided what I thought." He pushed the brochure toward me. "Mom, you're 67. I'm aware. This house is a lot. It was the same house where I had raised him, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modest backyard. A brick ranch Thomas and I had bought when Ethan was 6. Apparently, it had transformed into an impossible burden sometime after my 67th birthday. I manage it, I said, for now. I looked at him. For now, Lauren stepped in. He just means things change. Things always change. You know what she means, Ethan said. I turned toward him. Then explain it. He began listing examples. The faucet. 2 months earlier, I had left the kitchen faucet running while answering the telephone. It ran for perhaps 4 minutes. You forgot the water. I was speaking to Patty. You still forgot. Then came my reading glasses. You called me because you couldn't find them. They were under a magazine. That's the point. What point you're forgetting things? I stared at him. Ethan laughed. Tuesday you called Lauren from the grocery store because you couldn't remember whether you needed milk. Lauren looked down. He frowned. That's different. Why? Because I'm busy. So am I. His irritation showed. I realized then that we weren't discussing evidence. We were discussing a conclusion. Every ordinary mistake I made would be evidence, because Ethan had already decided what it proved. Lauren touched the brochure. Willow Creek is beautiful. I'm sure it is. We toured it. I looked at her. You toured it? Another glance passed between them. Ethan answered. We wanted to make sure it was good enough before bringing you. Before bringing me, I mean before showing it to you. I let the silence stretch. Have you spoken to someone there? Ethan hesitated. We asked questions. What kind of availability? Pricing? Normal things. Did you give them my name? He shifted in his chair. Mom, don't turn this into an interrogation. I sat back. That was answer enough. Lauren reached across the table. We can visit Saturday. We, all of us. I have plans Saturday. Ethan blinked. What plans? Festival meeting at 10. Patty and I are reviewing volunteer assignments. His mouth tightened. Again, the fall festival. I thought we settled that. No. You told me what you wanted. You're being stubborn. And you're scheduling my weekends. Lauren spoke softly. Rosalie, imagine not worrying about property taxes, repairs, yard work. I don't worry about those things. You will eventually. There was that word again. Eventually. My future had become a place where Ethan and Lauren could win every argument. Eventually I might fall. Eventually I might forget something important. Eventually the roof might need replacing. Eventually I might need help. All true. But eventually wasn't tonight. I'm not moving, I said. Ethan's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. What do you mean? I mean I have not decided to move. We're not saying tomorrow. You told the church September. Lauren folded her hands. That was probably too specific. I looked at her. Probably Ethan stood. This is going nowhere. He began collecting the papers. I noticed how frustrated he seemed, not worried, not disappointed. Frustrated. As though I had failed to perform a task on schedule. I'm going to leave this, he said, tapping the brochure. Read it when you're calmer. I am calm. That's not what I meant. I know exactly what you meant. He kissed my forehead. It felt automatic. Lauren hugged me again. At the door, she said, "We really do want what's best for you." I watched them walk to their SUV. For most of my life, I had believed love announced itself clearly. That night, I began wondering how often control borrowed love's voice. I returned to the kitchen. The Willow Creek brochure sat beneath the light. I almost threw it away. Instead, I made tea and read every page. Not because I was considering moving, because Ethan had researched something involving my future, and I wanted to know exactly how far he had gone. There were floor plans, monthly rates, dining options, transportation schedules. A business card had been tucked inside. Melissa Grant, Senior Living Advisor. Below her name in Ethan's handwriting was a Saturday appointment time, 10:30 a.m. So he hadn't merely suggested we visit, he had scheduled it. I turned another page. A yellow sticky note was attached beside a photograph of a one-bedroom apartment. Good size for Mom. I removed it. Underneath was another handwritten note directly on the brochure. Deposit refundable for 30 days. I stopped breathing for a second. Deposit had Ethan put money down. I searched the folder but found no receipt. Maybe he had only asked. Maybe. That word was becoming less comforting. I carried the brochure toward the trash, then stopped. Something was written on the back cover. 4 words. House ready by Sept. 15. I read them twice. Then a third time. House ready. Not Mom move Sept. 15. Not Willow Creek Sept. 15. House ready. I walked slowly to the living room window. Across the street, porch lights were coming on one by one. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower hummed. I looked around the home Thomas and I had built our life inside. The oak dining table he refinished himself. The hallway where we marked Ethan's height in pencil until he was 14. The fireplace Thomas complained about every winter and loved every Christmas. My house. Ready. For what? Or more importantly, for whom? I returned to the kitchen and placed the brochure inside a drawer instead of throwing it away. Then I locked the drawer. For the first time since Ethan's announcement at church, I stopped asking why my son wanted me to move. I began asking a different question. Why did he need my house empty by September 15? The next morning I did something Ethan probably wasn't expecting. I said nothing. I didn't call him about the words on the brochure. I didn't ask Lauren why my house needed to be ready by September 15. I didn't mention Willow Creek, the possible deposit, or the appointment they had scheduled without me. And I made coffee, carried it into the spare bedroom Thomas had once used as an office, and opened the bottom drawer of an old metal filing cabinet. If my son had made plans involving my house, I wanted facts before I gave him another opportunity to explain those facts away. The deed was exactly where I remembered putting it. That alone made me smile bitterly. According to Ethan, I was becoming forgetful. Yet I remembered the precise folder drawer and plastic sleeve containing a document I had not touched in nearly 4 years. I laid it on the desk. Rosalie Carmichael. My name. Thomas's name had been removed from the title after his death, with the paperwork properly recorded. I checked the property tax records next. Paid. Homeowner's insurance. Current. Utilities. Current. Mortgage. There hadn't been one for years. Thomas and I had made the final payment 9 months before he died. I remembered that day clearly. He had come home holding a bottle of cheap champagne and the letter from the bank. "We finally own every brick," he had said. Then he kissed me in the kitchen while I laughed, because neither of us even liked champagne. That house had never been fancy, but it was ours, and now it was mine. I sat at the desk looking at the deed and began remembering conversations I had dismissed at the time. Ethan asking whether I still kept important papers in the filing cabinet. Ethan wondering how much property tax I paid each year. Ethan asking if I had ever considered adding his name to the deed, just to make things easier someday. At the time, I had thought nothing of it. I was my son. Children ask parents about practical matters as they grow older, or at least that was what I had told myself. Then another memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, Ethan had been helping me replace a light fixture in the hallway. While we worked, he had said, "You know this place must be worth a lot more now than when you and Dad bought it." I had laughed. That wouldn't be difficult. We bought it for less than some people pay for pickup trucks now. How much do you think it's worth? I have no idea. You've never checked? No reason to. He had seemed surprised. I hadn't been. I didn't think of my home as money. Apparently Ethan might have. I spent nearly 2 hours going through records. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been changed. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Because everything Ethan had asked about over the previous year suddenly formed a pattern. The mortgage, the deed, insurance, taxes, market value, where I kept documents. Each question had seemed harmless by itself. Together they sounded different. Around noon, Patty called. "You busy? I've spent my morning proving to myself that I still know how to read paperwork." There was a pause. "Is this about Ethan?" "Yes." "Want company?" 20 minutes later, Patty was sitting at my kitchen table with 2 chicken salad sandwiches from Millie's Diner. I showed her the Willow Creek brochure. Her eyes widened when she reached the handwritten note. "House ready by September 15. She looked up. "What does that mean? I was hoping you could tell me." "Did you ask him?" "Not yet." Patty studied my face. "Good. That surprised me. You don't think I should?" "I think Ethan has had weeks to decide what he wants to tell you. Maybe you need a little time to decide what you want to ask." That was Patty. She could make common sense sound like something carved into stone. We ate quietly for a few minutes. Then she put down her sandwich. "There's something else." My stomach tightened. "What Lauren said something after Bible study a few weeks ago. To you, no. To Denise Walker. I was standing nearby." "What did she say?" Patty hesitated. "She was complaining about their house. Said Sophie needed more room, Ethan needed a proper office, and their mortgage was ridiculous." I waited. Then she said they might finally have room to breathe soon. I looked around my kitchen. Room. My 3-bedroom house. My paid-off 3-bedroom house. What did Denise say? She asked if they were buying somewhere, and Lauren said something like that. I leaned back. The refrigerator hummed behind me. That could mean anything. It could. But neither of us believed it. After Patty left, I tried to focus on fall festival paperwork. I lasted 12 minutes. At 3:30, the doorbell rang. Sophie stood on my porch with her backpack hanging from one shoulder. "Grandma." My heart softened immediately. Sophie had Ethan's brown eyes, but Thomas's habit of biting the inside of her cheek whenever she was nervous. "What are you doing here?" "Dad's working late. Mom has an appointment. Can I hang out until she picks me up?" "Of course." She dropped her backpack near the kitchen and headed straight for the refrigerator as she had since she was tall enough to open it. "Do you still have lemonade top shelf?" She poured herself a glass and sat across from me. Her eyes landed on the fall festival binder. "You're really running it, apparently." She grinned. "Dad said you signed up just to make him mad. Your father has always overestimated how much free time I have for revenge." She laughed. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. We talked about school, a girl named Madison, who had apparently ruined somebody's relationship through a group chat, and Sophie's upcoming chemistry test. Then she looked around the kitchen. Her expression changed. What nothing? Sophie. She took a drink. I was just thinking. Dangerous habit. Another smile. Then she said it. Grandma, are we really going to live here after you leave? My entire body went still. Sophie noticed immediately. What I set down my pen. Who told you that her face lost its color? Dad. When I don't know. A while ago. How long is a while? She stared at her lemonade. Maybe since spring. Spring. Months before Ethan's church announcement. I forced my voice to remain gentle. What exactly did he say? Sophie looked frightened now. Grandma, I thought you knew. I'm not angry with you. Mom said you wanted somewhere smaller. I said nothing. And Dad said once you moved, we might move here because our house costs too much and this one has more space. There it was. The sentence I had been circling around since Sunday. My home wasn't simply something Ethan wanted me to leave. It was somewhere he planned to go. Sophie rushed on. I thought you were okay with it. I know. Mom already talked about which room would be mine. A chill moved through me. Which room? She pointed toward the hallway. The guest room facing the backyard. That had been Thomas's office. And Dad said the garage could be his office because he works from home sometimes. I looked toward the door, leading into the garage. My son had planned where his desk would sit inside a house I had never agreed to leave. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Was I not supposed to tell you? I reached across the table and took her hand. You haven't done anything wrong, but Dad. This is between your father and me, not you. She nodded, but I could feel her fingers trembling. When Lauren picked her up an hour later, I said nothing. I stood at the front door and watched their car disappear down the street. Then I walked through my house slowly. The guest bedroom. The garage. The kitchen Lauren apparently intended to inherit without a funeral. Every room looked different because someone else had already imagined themselves inside it. That evening I returned to Thomas's old filing cabinet. This time I wasn't looking for tax records. I was looking for the original deed. And as I pulled out the old document box, I realized something that hurt more than Ethan's lie at church. My son hadn't been planning where I would live. He had been planning what would happen after I got out of his way. The document box was heavier than I remembered. I carried it from Thomas's old office to the dining room and set it beneath the chandelier we had bought 22 years earlier because Thomas insisted the original fixture made our house look like a courthouse basement. For a moment, I simply stood there with my hands resting on the lid. I had opened that box after his funeral. I had opened it when the insurance company needed paperwork. After that, I had avoided it. Not because the papers frightened me, but because Thomas was everywhere inside. His handwriting, receipts he had saved for reasons known only to him, warranty cards for appliances we no longer owned, a photograph of Ethan at 12 holding his first fishing rod. I lifted the lid. The original deed was inside a blue envelope. I read every line. The house had passed fully to me after Thomas's death. Everything had been recorded properly. No Ethan, no Lauren, no ambiguity. I was the sole owner of the home my son was already planning to occupy. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I thought about Sophie, the fear in her eyes after she realized I hadn't known. At 16, she had been dropped into an adult deception without understanding she was part of it. My phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen. Hi, sweetheart. Grandma. Her voice was quiet. Is everything okay? Are you mad at me? My heart hurt. No. I told Dad what I said. I closed my eyes. What happened? He got upset. With you. He said I shouldn't repeat private family conversations. I took a slow breath. Of course. The problem wasn't that Ethan had planned to move into my house without asking. The problem apparently was that Sophie had mentioned it. You listened to me, I said. You did nothing wrong. But I think Dad's mad. That is for your father to work through. I thought you knew Grandma. I swear, I believe you. There was silence. Then she whispered, Mom measured your guest room. I already knew that, but hearing it again made the violation feel strangely intimate. When, a couple months ago, I remembered the day. Lauren had come over while I was sorting clothes for the church donation drive. She had disappeared down the hallway for several minutes. When she returned, she said she had been using the bathroom. Now I wondered whether she had been carrying a tape measure in her purse. What else have they talked about? Sophie hesitated. You don't have to tell me anything that makes you uncomfortable. I just don't want everybody fighting. Neither do I. That was true. I didn't want war. I wanted my life back before anyone had officially taken it. Sophie spoke carefully. Mom said the kitchen would look brighter if the cabinets were painted white. I looked toward my oak cabinets. Thomas and I had installed them together. Mostly Thomas installed them while I held tools and tried not to laugh at his language. She wants to change the curtains too, Sophie continued. And Dad said he could put a desk and shelves in the garage. Every sentence felt like someone walking through my home opening drawers. Did your father ever say I gave him the house? No. He said you wouldn't need it anymore. That was somehow worse. Not that I had given something away, that I simply wouldn't need it. Someone else had determined the expiration date on my needs. Sophie began crying. I'm sorry. Sweetheart, stop apologizing. I feel like I ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything. You told me something I had a right to know. I made her promise to focus on school and stay out of whatever happened between the adults. When we hung up, I sat quietly. I could have called Ethan. I could have demanded answers. But anger has a way of making people reveal only what they need to defend themselves. I wanted the truth before I gave him a chance to rearrange it. So I returned to the box. Beneath the deed were tax records and old bank statements. Then I found one of Thomas's yellow legal pads. Most pages contained ordinary notes, measurements for the backyard shed, a list of tools, a phone number for a plumber. Then an envelope slipped from between two pages. On the front, Thomas had written, Rosie. Nobody had called me Rosie since he died. I sat down. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside were two handwritten pages. I recognized the letter immediately. Thomas had written it during his final year after the cardiologist told us his heart was weaker than either of us wanted to admit. I had read it once. Apparently I had placed it here and forgotten. Thomas wrote about practical things first. The furnace, insurance, the savings account. Then Ethan. Our son had been going through a difficult period at work then, and Thomas had worried that Ethan relied too heavily on us whenever life became uncomfortable. One sentence had been underlined. Helping him is not the same as carrying him. I continued reading. Near the bottom was another line. This one stopped me. If I go first, don't let Ethan confuse helping you with deciding for you. He loves you, but sometimes he thinks loving someone gives him the right to take the wheel. I pressed the letter against the table. Thomas had seen something years earlier that I had refused to see. Ethan wasn't cruel. That mattered. He had been a loving son in countless ways. After Thomas died, Ethan called me every evening for months. He fixed my garbage disposal. He sat beside me on the first Christmas without his father. He had held my hand at the cemetery when I finally cried. That history was why I had ignored the small moments of control. The restaurant he chose after asking where I wanted to eat. The contractor he hired before I approved a repair. The doctor he suggested I switch to because mine was too far away. Each thing seemed small, helpful even, until help became assumption, and assumption became authority, and now authority had become an imaginary moving date. I folded Thomas's letter carefully. The doorbell rang. My whole body tensed. I expected Ethan. Instead, Patty stood outside holding two fall festival binders. I brought trouble, she announced. I smiled despite myself. What kind vendor applications? She came inside and spread papers across the kitchen table. For the next 2 hours we worked. Pie contest, craft booths, church choir, children's games, local farmers. For 2 hours nobody discussed where I should live. Nobody questioned whether I could remember appointments. Nobody treated me like a problem waiting to be solved. I was simply Rosalie. When Patty left, I walked through the house again. This time I didn't see Lauren's imaginary curtains or Ethan's imaginary office. I saw Thomas painting the hallway, Sophie sleeping on the couch during Christmas, Ethan coming through the front door after college. I saw my life, my past, and more importantly, my future. I returned to the dining room and placed Thomas's letter beside the deed. One proved that the house belonged to me. The other reminded me that my decisions did too. I whispered into the empty room, "I hear you, Thomas." Then I locked both documents away. Ethan believed the question was whether I would move willingly or eventually be convinced. He was wrong. The question had changed. Now I wanted to know how far my son was prepared to go when I finally told him no. By Wednesday morning, the fall festival had stopped feeling like an act of defiance. It had become work, real work, and I was grateful for it. At 9 o'clock, Patty and I spread 3 binders, a church calendar, 2 legal pads, and enough coffee to keep a small construction crew awake across the fellowship hall table. "We need someone for the children's games," Patty said. Deborah said the youth group could handle them. The youth group nearly started a water balloon war during vacation Bible school. Then we'll keep them away from water. Patty laughed. That sound felt good. For the first time since Ethan's announcement, I went several minutes without thinking about him. The Fall Festival had been a Cedar Ridge tradition for 38 years. Families came from neighboring towns for apple pies, quilts, crafts, hay rides, bluegrass music, children's games, and the charity auction. The previous chairperson had moved to Florida in June, leaving Pastor Michael worried the festival might have to be scaled down. I had signed my name partly because Ethan had announced my disappearance before asking whether I intended to disappear. But once I began planning, something changed. I wanted the job. By noon, we had assigned booth coordinators, contacted 3 local farms about pumpkins, and convinced George Mercer to organize parking. I remembered every phone number Patty gave me, every deadline, every volunteer. Nobody asked whether I had left a faucet running 2 months earlier. Nobody cared where I had misplaced my glasses. They asked questions. I answered them. They trusted me. That afternoon, Pastor Michael stopped beside our table. "How's my Fearless Festival committee?" "Fearless is optimistic," Patty said. I handed him our preliminary schedule. He scanned it. "You did all this since Sunday." Patty helped. Patty pointed at me. "She's being modest." Pastor Michael looked impressed. "We may have found ourselves a permanent chairperson. Let me survive October 1st. He laughed. Then his expression changed slightly. "Speaking of October, I knew what was coming. Ethan told me you might not be here." "Might well." He sounded more certain. "I imagine he did." Pastor Michael studied me. "Is everything all right?" It would have been easy to tell him everything. Instead, I said, "I'm still living in my house, still driving my car, and still capable of reading a calendar." His eyebrows rose. Then he nodded. "That answers more than you probably intended." Maybe it did. By Friday, the festival had taken over half my dining table. I called vendors, negotiated a discount on portable toilets, confirmed insurance requirements, and created a volunteer schedule. Deborah Collins, our treasurer, stopped by with budget records. "You're organized," she said. "I spent 31 years managing a dental office. If you can coordinate 4 dentists, 6 hygienists, emergency patients, insurance companies, and a receptionist going through her 3rd divorce, a pumpkin festival isn't terrifying." Deborah laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Ethan was telling people I needed a simpler life, I was coordinating an event expected to attract hundreds of people. Sunday morning, I arrived at church early. The volunteer board was already filling. Apple pie contest, full. Craft booths, full. Hayride, 2 openings. Children's games, full. Charity auction, full. I was pinning a revised schedule when Ethan appeared. "Mom." I turned. He was alone. "Good morning." He looked at the board. "You're really doing this?" "Yes. I thought after a few days you'd cool off. About volunteering, about making a point." I pushed another thumbtack into the board. "Not everything I do is about you." His face tightened. "You signed up 5 minutes after my announcement. That part was about you. At least I could be truthful. But this isn't anymore." I gestured toward the schedules. "I like doing this. You're exhausting yourself. I'm enjoying myself. You've been running around all week. I've been making phone calls. You know what I mean? Actually, I was beginning to realize I didn't. Or perhaps I understood too well. Every sign of independence had become something Ethan needed to reinterpret as danger. If I stayed home, I was isolated. If I stayed busy, I was exhausting myself. If I asked questions, I was stubborn. If I disagreed, I was emotional. There was no version of my behavior that could prove I was capable because the conclusion had already been written. I'm fine, Ethan. He lowered his voice. This isn't about whether you can organize a church festival. What is it about your future? My future seems to be very important to everyone except me. That's unfair, is it? He glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. Lauren and I are trying to help. I know. Then stop fighting us. I looked at him carefully. Why does helping me require me to surrender? That's dramatic. Is it? He sighed. You're 67. Dad is gone. You're alone in that house. I'm alone. I'm not helpless. I never said helpless. You told an entire church I was leaving because you decided I shouldn't live where I live. That's not what happened. Then what happened? His silence lasted 1 second too long. I stepped closer. What exactly becomes easier if I leave by September? His eyes changed. There it was. The same flicker I had seen after church. Worry. You're still stuck on that brochure. I'm stuck on the fact that my house apparently has a deadline. It was a note. About what planning? For whom? His jaw tightened. Mom, please. For whom, Ethan? Before he could answer, Patty entered carrying a cardboard box. Rosalie, the raffle tickets came. Ethan stepped back. The conversation was over. For now. Patty glanced between us. Bad time. Time, no, I said. Perfect timing. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Then he pointed toward the festival board. You need to stop trying to prove something. I felt something inside me settle. I'm not proving anything. Yes, you are. No, Ethan. I'm living. He stared at me. That's all this is. I'm making plans. I'm seeing friends. I'm volunteering. I'm deciding where I'll be next month and the month after that. Those are ordinary things. You're making this harder than it needs to be. The words landed differently this time. I had heard them before. At church. At home. Now again. I looked directly at him, making what harder. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That frightened me. Because if this were only about my safety, there should have been an easy answer. Moving, downsizing, getting older. Any of those would have worked. Instead, my son looked like a man who had almost revealed something he wasn't ready to explain. Finally, he said, "You'll understand eventually." Then he walked away. Patty waited until he disappeared into the sanctuary. What was that? I don't know. But that wasn't entirely true. I knew something now. Ethan wasn't simply hoping I would move. He needed me to. There was a difference. One was concern. The other had a deadline. I looked at the festival board. October 17. My name was printed at the top of the schedule. Festival chairperson, Rosalie Carmichael. Only a week earlier, I had written my name there because I refused to let my son publicly erase me. Now the festival was doing something else. It was showing everyone, including me, that I was still capable of running my own life. And judging by Ethan's face, that was becoming a serious problem for whatever he had planned. That afternoon, I went home and opened the locked drawer containing the Willow Creek brochure. I read Ethan's handwritten note again. House ready by September 15. Then I remembered his words from church. You're making this harder than it needs to be. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. What happened on September 15th if I refused to leave? Ethan waited 4 days before trying again. That alone told me he had changed tactics. He arrived Thursday afternoon carrying a slim black folder instead of a retirement brochure. No Lauren. No speech about Willow Creek. No mention of September 15. He even brought blueberry muffins from my favorite bakery. For 10 minutes, we sat at the kitchen table discussing ordinary things. Sophie's chemistry test, the weather, a new manager at Ethan's company. It almost felt like the conversations we used to have. Then he placed the black folder between us. There's one practical thing I wanted to handle. I looked at it. What practical thing emergency paperwork? My stomach tightened. What kind nothing dramatic? He opened the folder and removed several pages. I've been thinking about what would happen if you got sick or had an accident and couldn't take care of things temporarily. Things, bills, insurance, the house, your accounts. I didn't touch the papers, and you've solved this problem I'm trying to. Ethan turned the document toward me. You sign here, and if there's ever an emergency, I can step in. I looked at the heading. Durable power of attorney. Those words changed the temperature in the room. You said this was emergency paperwork. It is. It says durable power of attorney. That's basically what I mean. Basically. I had spent 31 years managing a dental office. I had watched patients sign financing agreements they hadn't read and then become furious when the terms turned out to mean exactly what the paper said. Thomas used to tease me because I read every contract before signing. Apparently, Ethan had forgotten that. I pulled the document closer. Mom, you don't need to read every line. I looked up. Why not? It's standard. Then reading it shouldn't hurt. He leaned back. I began reading. The document granted broad authority involving banking transactions, financial accounts, taxes, insurance contracts, and real estate matters. I read that section twice. Real estate. There it was. I continued. Ethan watched me. His knee began bouncing beneath the table. When I reached the final page, I set it down. Who prepared this? I found a standard form and had someone look at it. Who? A guy I know. What kind of guy? He sighed. Mom. What kind? He works with contracts. That isn't an answer. He knows what he's doing. I tapped the document. This gives you authority over my finances. Only if needed. That isn't what this says. That's how I would use it. I looked at him. And my house. What about it? This includes real estate. His eyes dropped toward the document. That's standard language. Would this allow you to sign documents involving my property in certain circumstances? What circumstances? Why are you acting like I'm trying to steal your house? The question came too quickly. I hadn't used the word steal. I folded my hands. I asked what authority this gives you. It gives me the ability to help. There's that word again. What word, help? His face hardened. I continued. You told the church I was moving without asking me. You scheduled a tour at Willow Creek without asking me. You and Lauren have discussed moving into my house without asking me. Now you've brought me a document that could give you financial authority, and you're calling it help. Sophie had no business telling you that. There it was. Not denial. Anger at Sophie. Leave her out of this. She repeated a private conversation. She told her grandmother that her parents planned to live in her grandmother's house. We were discussing possibilities. Lauren measured the guest room. Ethan went silent. I watched his face. He hadn't known Sophie told me that part. Did she measure my kitchen too? Mom, stop. No. The word surprised both of us. I rarely spoke to Ethan that way. No, Ethan. I've spent days being told to stop asking questions about my own life. I'm done with that. His chair scraped backward. You're making me sound like some criminal. I haven't called you anything. You don't trust me. Right now, I don't understand you. I'm your son. That should make honesty easier, not optional. He stood and paced toward the sink. I watched his shoulders rise and fall. For one brief moment, I saw exhaustion instead of anger. Then it disappeared. You have no idea how much pressure I'm under. The sentence caught my attention. What pressure? He turned around. Work, family, everything. What does your pressure have to do with my house? Nothing. Too fast. I stood. Then why do you need control over my house to help me silence? He looked at me. I waited. The clock above the stove ticked 6 times. Finally, he said, You're twisting everything. No. I'm reading what you brought me. No. I'm reading what you brought me. I pushed the document toward him. I'm not signing it. His expression hardened. Not today. Not ever. Not this document. Mom, if something happens, if I decide I need a power of attorney, I will speak to my own lawyer. That stopped him. Your lawyer? Yes. You don't have a lawyer. I can hire one. He gave a short, humorless laugh. This is unbelievable. What is I'm trying to protect you, and you're treating me like the enemy? I felt the sting of that, because I didn't want my son to be my enemy. I wanted him to be the man who brought me soup when I had the flu. The boy, Thomas, taught to throw a baseball. The father who once drove 3 hours because Sophie had forgotten her stuffed rabbit at my house. But love did not make that document harmless. And memories did not make my signature less valuable. I don't want an enemy, I said. I want a son who asks before he decides. Ethan shoved the papers into the folder. You're going to regret making everything this difficult. He left the muffins. I watched his truck disappear down the street. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Lauren. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered, Hello, Rosalie, what happened with Ethan? You'll have to ask him. He came home furious. I refused to sign a power of attorney. Lauren sighed. He's trying to help you, so everyone keeps telling me. You have no idea what he's carrying right now. I remembered Ethan saying almost the same thing. What is he carrying? Silence. Then Lauren said, There's a lot of financial pressure. I sat straighter. What financial pressure? I shouldn't have said that. Lauren. He's been trying to keep everything together. What everything I need to go. Does this involve your house? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Lauren, we'll talk later. The call ended. I remained at the kitchen table staring at the blueberry muffins. Financial pressure. For the first time, the strange pieces began moving toward each other. Their expensive mortgage. Lauren saying they might finally have room to breathe. The plan to move into my paid-off house. The September deadline. And now Ethan wanting authority over my finances and real estate. I went to the drawer where I had locked the Willow Creek brochure. I placed it beside Thomas's letter and the deed. 3 pieces of paper. 3 different versions of my future. One written by my husband reminding me to keep my voice. One proving my home belonged to me. And one showing exactly when my son wanted that home empty. I closed the drawer. Until that moment I had believed Ethan's plan was about my age. Now I understood something else was driving him. Something he and Lauren were desperate not to tell me. Money. The only question left was how much. And what my son had already decided my house was worth to him. Once money entered the picture, I began seeing things I had overlooked for months. Ethan's new truck was gone. I noticed it the following Sunday when he and Lauren arrived at church in her SUV. The truck had been less than 2 years old. Ethan had loved that thing with an enthusiasm Thomas used to reserve for college football. After service, I asked casually, Where's the truck? Ethan barely looked at me. Shop. What happened? Transmission. Lauren's face tightened. It was small. Most people wouldn't have noticed. A wife looking at her husband for half a second too long. But I was watching everything now. Later that afternoon, Sophie called to ask whether she could help with the fall festival. You can work the apple pie table, I told her. Only if you promise I don't have to judge. You're 16. Nobody trusts your pie judgment anyway. She laughed. Then she became quiet. Grandma. Yes. Are you and Dad still fighting? I wouldn't call it fighting. What would you call it? Learning where the boundaries are. She didn't answer. I could tell something was bothering her. What is it? Dad sold his truck. I closed my eyes. So much for the transmission. When last week? Why, I don't know. Mom said we're cutting expenses. I chose my next words carefully. Sophie, you don't need to tell me anything your parents consider private. I know, I mean it. I know, Grandma. It's just weird at home. Her voice had changed. She sounded younger. Mom keeps checking the bank app. Dad's working all the time. They had a fight because some payment was due. My heart sank. Not because I was pleased to be right. Because I wasn't. Whatever Ethan had done, he was still my son. Have they said anything about moving all the time? Into my house? She hesitated. Mom said if they sold ours, it would fix a lot. There it was. I thanked her for being honest, then changed the subject. After we hung up, I sat on the porch with my coffee. A memory came back. Almost a year earlier, Ethan had told Thomas's old friend George about an investment opportunity. I had overheard only pieces: commercial property, development, a partner from work. Ethan had been excited. When I asked about it later, he said it was nothing Mom needed to worry about. At the time, I had been grateful. Now I wondered if I should have worried. That evening, Lauren called. She sounded exhausted. "Can we talk?" "Yes." Without turning it into another argument, "That depends on whether you're planning my life again." She exhaled. "Fair." I waited. Finally, she said, "Ethan made an investment last year." I didn't interrupt. "He went in with two men he knew through work. It was supposed to be a small real estate development outside Nashville. How small, not small enough." My stomach tightened. What happened? The financing changed. One partner pulled out. Construction costs went up. And Ethan, he kept putting money in because he thought walking away would mean losing everything. That sounded exactly like my son. Thomas used to say Ethan could turn a bad decision into a terrible one simply because he hated admitting the first decision had been wrong. How much? Lauren became quiet. "I don't know the final number." I didn't believe her. What did he use? Savings. What else? Credit. What else? Another silence. A personal loan. I looked across my yard. "And your house?" "We haven't lost our house, Rosalie." That wasn't my question. "We have a large mortgage." I knew that. They had bought their house 5 years earlier when Ethan received a promotion. 4 bedrooms, stone countertops, oversized garage, neighborhood pool. Thomas had privately called it a house designed to impress people who don't live there. "What happens if you sell it?" Lauren answered immediately. "We could clear enough to deal with a significant portion of the debt." "And where would you live?" She didn't answer. I did it for her. Here. Rosalie. That was the plan. We thought it made sense. Ethan thought you'd be happier somewhere with more support. No. Ethan needed somewhere without a mortgage. That's not fair. Isn't it? Lauren's voice sharpened. You have a house that's completely paid off. 3 bedrooms. You're one person. I felt something inside me go cold. There it was. The arithmetic. 3 bedrooms. One old woman. One struggling family. Therefore, the old woman had more than she deserved. I am not occupying unused inventory, Lauren. I am living in my home. I didn't mean it that way. You measured my guest room. Silence. Sophie told you. Yes. Lauren sighed. We were planning ahead. For a decision I hadn't made. We assumed Ethan would convince you. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not ask me. Convince me. My answer had never been treated as an answer. Only an obstacle waiting to be overcome. Did Ethan plan to sell my house? No. She answered quickly enough that I believed her. At least not now, she added. I closed my eyes. At least not now, I mean eventually. Years from now. If you didn't need it. Again. If I didn't need it. When exactly did my home become part of your financial recovery plan? Lauren's voice softened. We were scared. For the first time, I heard something other than entitlement. Fear. We have Sophie, she continued. College is coming. Ethan thought the investment would give us security. Instead, everything started falling apart. I understood fear. Thomas and I had known lean years. We had once stretched $43 across 9 days until his paycheck arrived. But we had never solved our problems by assigning someone else's property to ourselves. You should have told me. Ethan was ashamed. So instead, he told an entire church I was moving. I told him not to do that. That surprised me. He said once people knew, it would make the transition feel more real. I nearly laughed. The transition. I know how it sounds. No, I don't think you do. After the call ended, I sat in darkness for a long time. The pieces finally fit. The retirement community. September 15. The room measurements. The questions about my mortgage. The power of attorney. Ethan and Lauren could sell their expensive house, use the equity against their debt, and move into mine. No mortgage, no rent, a financial reset. All they needed was one thing: me gone. I wanted to hate Ethan in that moment. It would have been easier. But I couldn't. I could see how it happened. A bad investment, then fear, then pride, then another loan, then desperation, then a solution: my house. And once Ethan saw that solution, he began arranging the world around it. First, he imagined me moving. Then he discussed it with Lauren. Then they told Sophie. Then Lauren measured rooms. Then Ethan told church members. Eventually, perhaps even Ethan stopped remembering that I had never said yes. That was the danger. People can repeat a selfish decision so many times that it begins sounding like sacrifice. I went into Thomas's old office and opened the locked drawer. His letter was still there. Helping him is not the same as carrying him. I ran my finger over the sentence. My son was drowning financially. Every instinct I had as a mother wanted to reach into the water. But Ethan wasn't asking me for a hand. He had quietly decided I should climb out of my own boat so he could use it. I folded the letter again. Now I understood why Ethan needed me gone. But one question remained. If I continued refusing to leave, would he accept my answer? Or had he already found another way to take control? The answer came from someone I never would have thought to ask. Deborah Collins. 3 days after Lauren finally admitted the truth about Ethan's failed investment, Deborah and I were sitting in the church office reviewing the fall festival budget. Deborah had been the festival treasurer for nearly a decade. She was 58, precise to the penny, and capable of spotting a missing receipt from across the room. During the week, she worked part-time at Cedar Ridge Title and Escrow. We had spent almost an hour discussing ordinary festival expenses when she closed her calculator. So she said casually, "Did you decide not to sell?" My pen stopped. "Sell what?" She looked up. "Your house." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Deborah's expression changed. Oh, one little word. But it told me everything. I placed my pen on the table. "Why would you think I was selling my house?" She immediately became cautious. "I may have misunderstood something." "What did you hear, Rosalie, because of where I work?" "I have to be careful. I'm not asking you to violate anyone's privacy." "I know." She folded her hands. "I don't have a transaction involving your property. Let me make that very clear." That gave me a small amount of relief. Then what happened? A while back, Ethan came into the office. My stomach tightened. How long ago? Maybe 6 weeks. Before the church announcement. Before Willow Creek. Before the power of attorney. What did he want? He asked general questions. About Deborah hesitated. Selling property for an older parent. I felt the blood drain from my face. She continued quickly. He never said you had agreed to sell anything. He asked hypotheticals. What kind of hypotheticals? Whether an adult child could handle a real estate transaction if the parent couldn't manage everything personally. I already knew the next part before she said it. And power of attorney? Deborah nodded. Yes. The room seemed suddenly too quiet. I thought about the black folder on my kitchen table. Ethan telling me it was emergency paperwork. You sign here, and if there's ever an emergency, I can step in. I had assumed the power of attorney was connected to his plan to move into my house. Now another possibility appeared. What exactly did you tell him? Nothing specific to your property. I explained that authority depends on the document's state law, the circumstances, and the title situation. I told him he needed to speak with an attorney. Did he? I don't know. Did he ask whether he could sell a house using power of attorney? Deborah's silence answered before her words did. Yes. I stared at the fall festival spreadsheet. Pumpkins, $425. Portable restrooms, $600. Tent rental, $850. Ordinary numbers, safe numbers. Nothing like the number suddenly forming in my mind. The value of my house. I looked back at Deborah. Did he mention me by name? She thought carefully. He referred to his mother. Since I know you're his mother, I made the connection. But again, Rosalie, he never presented documents or attempted a transaction. I understand. I honestly assumed you knew. So did everyone. The bitterness slipped out before I could stop it. Deborah reached across the table. Are you all right? No. It was the first time I had said that aloud. No, I don't think I am. She squeezed my hand. I told her enough to explain. The church announcement. Willow Creek, the September 15 note. The plan for Ethan and Lauren to move into my house, the power of attorney. By the time I finished, Deborah looked deeply uncomfortable. You need your own lawyer. I was thinking the same thing. Not Ethan's lawyer, not a family friend. Yours. I know. And take every document you have. I nodded. That afternoon, I drove home and pulled into my driveway. For several minutes, I remained inside the car. My house stood exactly as it always had. Red brick, white shutters. Thomas repainted twice because he hated the first shade. A maple tree near the driveway. 2 flower beds I kept promising myself I would weed. Nothing had changed. And yet I had never felt so protective of those walls. Until that week, I had thought the central question was whether Ethan planned to move into my home. Now I knew he had at least investigated something more serious. Could he control it? Could he sell it? Maybe he had never intended to. Maybe his questions had been part of some distant contingency. But the power of attorney changed everything. If I had signed it without reading, how much authority would I have handed him? I entered the house and locked the door behind me. Then I called Caroline Hayes. I knew her through the dental office. Years earlier, she had helped one of our hygienists settle her mother's estate. Her receptionist answered. Hayes Legal Group. My name is Rosalie Carmichael. I need an appointment about estate planning and a power of attorney. Are you looking to create one? I looked toward the drawer containing Ethan's papers. No, I said. I'm trying to make sure someone else can't make decisions for me. There was a pause. We can see you tomorrow at 11. I'll be there. After hanging up, I gathered everything. The deed, insurance information, bank records, Thomas's letter, the Willow Creek brochure. I even wrote down the sequence of events so I wouldn't forget anything. Sunday church announcement. Willow Creek appointment. House ready by September 15. Sophie's disclosure. Lauren's admission. Power of attorney. Ethan's questions at the title company. Seeing everything on one page made my stomach turn. It no longer looked like concern. It looked like a progression. First convince everyone I was leaving. Then find somewhere to send me. Then prepare to occupy my house. Then ask me to sign over financial authority. And somewhere in the middle, investigate whether that authority could extend to selling property. My phone rang. Ethan. I stared at his name until the ringing stopped. A minute later, a text appeared. Can we please stop doing this to each other? I read it twice. Doing this to each other. As though we had both made secret plans. As though I had announced his relocation to his coworkers. As though I had measured his bedroom. As though I had brought him legal papers and told him not to bother reading them. I typed a response. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm deciding for myself. I almost sent it. Instead, I deleted it. Tomorrow I would speak to Caroline. Tonight I needed silence. I carried the documents into Thomas's old office and placed them inside a canvas bag. His photograph sat on the bookshelf. You were right about him, I whispered. Then I immediately felt guilty. Thomas had never said Ethan was bad. He had said Ethan sometimes confused love with taking the wheel. Maybe that distinction still mattered. I hoped it did. Because beneath my anger, I was frightened by something more painful than losing a house. I was frightened of losing the son I thought I knew. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for Caroline's office, I received another message. This one was from Ethan. Mom, we need to settle this before September. There was that deadline again. September. I put the phone into my purse. For weeks, Ethan had been planning what happened next. Now it was my turn. And unlike my son, I wasn't going to make decisions in secret because I wanted something that belonged to someone else. I was going to make them because what belonged to me needed protecting. My home, my money, my choices, and most importantly, my right to remain Rosalie Carmichael, not somebody's elderly mother whose signature was more useful than her opinion. I picked up the canvas bag and walked out the door. For the first time since this began, I wasn't going somewhere Ethan had chosen for me. I was going to my own lawyer. Caroline Hayes did not look surprised when I finished telling her the story. That worried me. Her office sat above a pharmacy on Main Street in an old brick building with tall windows and floors that creaked beneath every step. Caroline was 54, with silver beginning to show at her temples, and the calm expression of someone who had spent years listening to families argue about money. She had let me talk for nearly 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she picked up the power of attorney Ethan had brought me. You did the right thing by not signing something you didn't understand. I understood enough to know I didn't like it. That may have saved you considerable trouble. My stomach tightened. Could Ethan have sold my house with this? Caroline didn't dramatize the answer. This document grants broad financial authority, including authority involving real estate. Whether a particular transaction could legally proceed would depend on multiple factors. But that isn't the most important issue. What is that you didn't want to give him this authority? The simplicity of that sentence nearly brought tears to my eyes. For weeks, everyone had been discussing what was practical, sensible, easier, safer. Caroline reduced the entire problem to one fact. I didn't want it, and that mattered. I don't want to punish my son, I said. Protecting yourself isn't punishment. I don't want to cut him out of my life. You don't have to. She slid the document aside. Your goal should be clarity. Your property is yours. Your accounts are yours. Your estate plan should reflect your wishes, and anyone acting for you should be someone you choose knowingly. For the next hour, we reviewed everything. My will was still valid, but it had not been updated since Thomas died. My beneficiary designations needed review. My emergency contacts at the bank and medical office still listed Ethan first. That didn't automatically give him financial control, Caroline explained, but given the circumstances, I wanted clearer boundaries. We discussed creating my own carefully limited documents and naming an independent alternate financial agent. Someone who wasn't under financial pressure. Someone whose future housing didn't depend on my decisions. I feel terrible saying that about my own son. Caroline looked at me. You can love someone and still recognize that their interests currently conflict with yours. That sentence stayed with me. By the time I left, I had a list. Update estate documents. Review beneficiary designations. Confirm ownership records. Change emergency contacts where appropriate. Create my own plan for incapacity instead of accepting Ethan's. Nothing dramatic, nothing vengeful, just locks on doors I had never realized were open. I felt lighter driving home. Then I turned into my driveway. 3 cardboard boxes sat inside my garage. I knew immediately they weren't mine. Ethan had a garage door remote from years earlier when Thomas was sick, and we wanted him to be able to get inside quickly. Apparently, he still had it. I parked and walked over. The boxes were labeled office books, files, winter clothes. I stared at them. Then I called Ethan. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, Mom. Why are your boxes in my garage? Silence. Then casually, I needed somewhere to put a few things. You have a garage. We're clearing stuff out. Why just organizing? Take them home. He sighed. Mom, they're 3 boxes. They're 3 boxes I didn't agree to store. Seriously. Yes, I'll get them later. When? This weekend. Tonight. His voice hardened. I'm at work. Then after work. What difference does it make? I looked at those boxes. Maybe to anyone else they were nothing. But I knew what they represented. First a box, then 5, then furniture. Then someone saying it was easier to leave everything because they would be moving in eventually anyway. It makes a difference because you put them in my house without asking. It's a garage. My garage. God, Mom. There was a pause. Then he said, You're really going to do this over a few boxes. This isn't about boxes. Then what is it about? You tell me. He hung up. At 6:30, his truck replacement, a 10-year-old sedan, I barely recognized, pulled into my driveway. Ethan stepped out. He didn't greet me. He opened the garage. I stood near the kitchen door while he carried the first box toward his car. On the second trip, he stopped. You met with a lawyer. I felt a chill. How do you know? Lauren saw your car downtown. That's not the same as knowing where I went. She recognized the building. I said nothing. Ethan set the box down. What are you doing making sure my affairs are organized? Because of me. Because they needed organizing. That's not an answer. I almost laughed at the irony. You've spent weeks refusing to answer my questions. I'm your son. And you're acting like I'm dangerous. I'm acting like I'm responsible for myself. He shook his head. This whole thing has gotten completely out of control. No, Ethan. I think that's exactly what's bothering you. His face changed. What is that supposed to mean you expected control? I expected you to be reasonable. Reasonable means moving because you need my house. His jaw tightened. You talked to Lauren? Yes. Of course. She told me about the investment. His face went pale. She had no right. She's frightened. So am I. The admission came so suddenly that I stopped. For a moment, my anger softened. He looked exhausted. There were shadows beneath his eyes I hadn't noticed before. I wanted to walk over and hold him. Every motherly instinct told me to fix it. Then I remembered Thomas's letter. Helping him is not the same as carrying him. What do you need? I asked. He laughed bitterly. It doesn't matter. It matters if you ask honestly. I needed one thing to go according to plan. I looked toward the boxes. Me. He didn't answer. My house. Still nothing. Finally, he said, if you moved, everything would be easier. For you, for everyone. No. Stop saying everyone when you mean yourself. His eyes flashed. We could sell our house. Sophie wouldn't have to change schools. We could get our heads above water, and you would be somewhere safe. There it is. What my removal dressed up as concern. That's not fair. Neither was announcing my move to the church. He picked up the final box. You're choosing a festival over your own family. The accusation landed hard. But this time I was ready. No. He stopped. I'm choosing not to disappear for your convenience. Ethan stared at me. I continued quietly. If you had come to me and said, Mom, I made a terrible financial mistake and I'm scared, we would have had a very different conversation. He looked away. But you didn't ask for help. You created a plan that required my obedience. That's not what I— Yes, it is. He carried the box toward the car. At the trunk, he turned back. What happens when you really do need help, I'll ask. And if you can't, I now have legal documents that explain exactly what happens. That struck him. So you changed everything. I clarified everything. Who's in charge I am? He stared at me for several seconds. Then he shut the trunk. The sound echoed across the driveway. I watched him leave. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. There is nothing satisfying about realizing you need protection from someone you raised. But sadness did not mean I had made the wrong decision. That evening I sat at my dining table updating the Fall Festival volunteer schedule. At the top of the page was the date. October 17th. I smiled faintly. Ethan had spent weeks building a future in which I was gone by September. I had quietly built one in which I was still exactly where I chose to be. And now for the first time his plan could not move forward without something he had tried very hard to avoid needing. My permission. The following Sunday, Pastor Michael asked me to stay after church. He waited until most of the congregation had left before approaching me near the front pew. Rosalie, do you have a few minutes? There was something careful in his voice. I knew immediately this wasn't about the fall festival. Of course. He led me to his office. Ethan was already there. I stopped in the doorway. My son sat in one of the chairs facing Pastor Michael's desk, his hands clasped between his knees. Ethan asked if we could talk together, Pastor Michael said. I looked at my son. You could have asked me yourself. I didn't think you'd come. You didn't try. Pastor Michael gestured toward the empty chair. Please. I sat. For several seconds nobody spoke. Finally, Pastor Michael folded his hands. Ethan came to see me Friday. I looked at Ethan. He's concerned about you. Of course he was. Concern had become the key that Ethan tried in every locked door. What exactly is he concerned about? Pastor Michael glanced toward him. I think Ethan should explain. Ethan leaned forward. I'm worried you're making decisions based on anger. What decisions? Everything. That's specific. Mom, please. No. If we're going to have this conversation in front of Pastor Michael, then let's have it clearly. Pastor Michael nodded slightly. Ethan took a breath. You refused to consider moving. You hired a lawyer. You changed financial documents. You're running yourself ragged with this festival. I've attended every festival meeting, Pastor Michael said. Rosalie doesn't appear to be running herself ragged. Ethan looked irritated. That's not the point. What is the point? I asked. He looked at me. You've become stubborn. The word landed harder than I expected. Not confused, not incapable, stubborn, meaning I understood what he wanted and refused to give it to him. Is disagreement now evidence that something is wrong with me? I didn't say something was wrong. You told people I don't feel safe living alone. I worry about you. You told people my house is too much for me. It will be eventually. You told the entire church I was moving. Because I thought we had reached an understanding. We hadn't. Pastor Michael raised a hand. Let me ask something. We both looked at him. Rosalie, do you want to move? No. The answer came easily. Have you chosen another place to live? No. Have you asked Ethan to make housing arrangements for you? Number Pastor Michael turned to Ethan. Did your mother ever actually tell you she wanted to move? Silence. I watched my son. He stared at the carpet. Pastor Michael waited. Ethan. She said she would think about it. That wasn't my question. Ethan rubbed his palms together. No. One word. But hearing him finally say it felt like someone opening a window in a room that had been sealed for weeks. No. I had never agreed. No. I had never asked. No. The story Ethan told everyone had never been true. Pastor Michael leaned back. Then I'm struggling to understand why the move was announced publicly as a settled decision. Ethan's face reddened. I was trying to help things along. What things? The transition. I almost laughed. There is no transition. Mom. No, Ethan. That word only works if I'm actually going somewhere. Pastor Michael looked between us. I want to be careful here. Families sometimes see situations differently. But I have watched Rosalie coordinate dozens of volunteers, manage a budget, solve scheduling problems, and organize one of our largest annual events. Ethan frowned. That doesn't mean she should live alone forever. I didn't say it did. Pastor Michael's voice remained calm. But nothing I've personally observed suggests she is currently unable to make her own decisions. For the first time, Ethan had no immediate response. I realized why he had come here. He expected Pastor Michael to help persuade me. Instead, the man Ethan had chosen as an authority figure was asking the same questions I had been asking. Ethan stood. This is ridiculous. Sit down, I said. He stared at me. To my surprise, he did. I softened my voice. I know about the investment. His eyes moved toward me. Lauren told you. Yes. His jaw tightened. I know you sold the truck. I know you're trying to sell your house. I know moving into mine would reduce your expenses. Pastor Michael's expression changed. Clearly, Ethan had not shared that part. Rosalie. I'm not finished. I turned toward Pastor Michael. Ethan brought me a durable power of attorney and told me it was emergency paperwork. It included broad financial and real estate authority. Pastor Michael looked at Ethan. Is that true? It was a standard document. That wasn't the question. Ethan's shoulders dropped. Yes. I also learned he asked a title company how power of attorney could be used when dealing with an older parent's property. I was asking questions. His voice rose. Pastor Michael remained calm. Why? Because somebody has to plan ahead. There it was again. Plan ahead. I looked at him. For whose future Ethan stood again. This time nobody stopped him. You both think I'm some kind of monster. I don't, I said. He looked at me. I think you're scared. That silenced him. I think something went wrong financially. I think you were ashamed. And instead of telling me the truth, you found a solution that required me to cooperate. His eyes filled with anger, but beneath it I saw something else. Fear. You don't understand. Then explain it. I can't. Why? Because you'll judge me. The words sounded almost like they came from the boy he used to be. For 1 second I wanted to cross the room. Instead, I stayed seated. I'm your mother, Ethan. I may be disappointed. I may be angry. But I would rather hear an ugly truth than live inside a beautiful lie. He looked away. Pastor Michael spoke gently. Your mother deserves the truth. Ethan laughed bitterly. You have no idea what I'm dealing with. Then tell me, I said. He shook his head. Not here. When he didn't answer, he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. You think this is about me wanting her house? Pastor Michael said no. Ethan looked directly at me. It's bigger than that. Then he left. The door closed. Pastor Michael and I sat in silence. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. For what? For accepting Ethan's announcement without asking you. I appreciated that more than he probably knew. You believed my son. Yes. So did I for most of my life. I stood. Through the office window, I could see volunteers setting up another fall festival display in the fellowship hall. My name was printed across the planning sheet. October was still here. Before I left, Pastor Michael asked one last question. Are you afraid of your son? I thought carefully. No. Then I picked up my purse. But I am afraid of what desperation has convinced him is reasonable. That evening, Ethan sent me a text. Tomorrow. Your house. Just me. I'll tell you everything. I stared at those words for a long time. For weeks, I had been chasing the truth through brochures, whispered conversations, legal documents, and other people's mistakes. Now Ethan was finally bringing it to my door himself. And judging by the way he had looked at me in Pastor Michael's office, I knew one thing. Whatever number my son was about to say, it was going to change our family. Ethan arrived the next evening at 6:15. Alone. No folder, no brochures, no legal papers. For the first time since this began, my son came into my house carrying nothing but himself. I had made coffee, though neither of us touched it. He sat at the kitchen table where he had once done algebra homework, while Thomas complained that modern schools made simple mathematics unnecessarily complicated. Now Ethan stared at the same scratched tabletop, as though the right words might be hidden in the wood. I waited. Finally, he said, It's $146,000. I had prepared myself for a large number. I still wasn't prepared for that one. What? That's what we owe. Approximately. I felt my stomach drop. 146,000. He nodded. How Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. It didn't happen all at once. Of course it hadn't. Disasters rarely do. He told me about the investment. A commercial development outside Nashville. A man from his industry had approached him about buying into a small property project. The original plan involved renovating an aging strip center and leasing the units. Ethan invested savings first. Then construction costs increased. One partner withdrew. The project fell behind schedule. They told us if we could just get through another 6 months, we'd recover everything. So you put in more? He nodded. How much too much? From where our savings? Then credit. And then a personal loan. I remembered Lauren's voice. He kept putting money in because he thought walking away would mean losing everything. Did you borrow against your house, not directly? The answer was technical enough to tell me the truth was complicated. What does that mean? We refinanced some things, consolidated others. I closed my eyes. Does Lauren know everything now? She does. Now I didn't tell her the full amount at first. There it was again. Shame creating secrecy. Secrecy creating bigger problems. When did she find out? March. Spring. Around the same time, Lauren had measured my guest room. I leaned back. And that's when my house entered the plan. Ethan looked down. Yes, the honesty hurt, but at least it was honesty. Explain it. He swallowed. If we sell our house after the mortgage and selling costs, we could free up enough equity to pay down a large part of what we owe. And then you would live here. Yes, without paying rent, we would help with expenses. That isn't what I asked. No rent. And where would I be? Willow Creek. The words sounded uglier now. Not because Willow Creek was bad. Because it had never been chosen for me. It had been chosen around me. How much would Willow Creek cost? He named a monthly figure. I stared at him. So I would leave a paid-off house to pay thousands every month for an apartment, so you could live here without a mortgage. When you say it like that, how else should I say it? His face reddened. You'd have amenities, transportation, people around you. I already have people around me. You know what I mean? No, Ethan. I know what you needed it to mean. He looked away. I took a breath. September 15th. His shoulders stiffened. What happened September 15? He hesitated. Our realtor thought that was when we could realistically have our house ready to list and begin moving things. There it was. My departure date had never been about Willow Creek availability. It had been about their house, their timeline, their financial rescue. You announced my move at church because you needed me committed. He didn't answer. Didn't you? Yes. The word was barely audible. You thought if everyone believed I was leaving, I would be embarrassed to change my mind. His eyes filled with shame. I thought it would make it feel settled. To me, to everyone. I stared at my son. That admission hurt worse than the debt. He had used my community as pressure. My friends, my church, my reputation. You made people say goodbye to me. I know. You let them think I was becoming incapable. I never said incapable. You said I didn't feel safe alone. I was trying to give them a reason. A reason for a decision I never made. I know. His voice cracked. For the first time, Ethan looked less like the man who had been pushing me around, and more like a frightened boy cornered by his own mistakes. But one question remained. The power of attorney. He closed his eyes. Mom, tell me. I wanted options. What options? If you moved and eventually wanted me managing things, I thought it would make everything easier. Would you have sold my house? He looked at me. Not immediately. My chest tightened. Eventually, if you decided you weren't coming back. But I hadn't decided to leave. I know. Then why did you ask the title company about selling property with power of attorney? His face changed. Deborah told you? She told me enough. He stood and walked toward the window. I was scared. I followed him with my eyes. Being scared does not answer the question. He turned around. I wanted to know what would be possible. That was the most frighteningly honest thing he had said, not what he intended, what would be possible. I thought of Thomas. He loves you, but sometimes he thinks loving someone gives him the right to take the wheel. My husband had been right. Ethan hadn't started this as a villain. He had started as a man terrified of failure. He had made one bad investment, then another desperate decision, then another. At every stage, he told himself the next step would fix the previous one. Eventually, I became one more problem to solve. When did my home become part of your financial plan? Ethan's eyes filled. I don't know. Yes, you do. He sat again. When I realized we couldn't keep paying everything. Why didn't you come to me? Because Dad would have been ashamed of me. The sentence broke something open. Your father is dead, Ethan. I know. He cannot judge you. I can. That stopped me. Ethan looked down. I'm 42 years old. I have a good job, a wife, a daughter. I was supposed to know better. I understood then. The retirement brochure, the lies, the church announcement, the power of attorney. They were not signs of confidence. They were signs of a man running from humiliation. But understanding him did not excuse him. I reached across the table. Look at me. He did. If you had come here 6 months ago and said, Mom, I made a terrible mistake, I would have listened. I know. No, I don't think you did. His eyes filled with tears. You decided it was easier to remove me from my home than admit you needed help. He wiped his face quickly. I'm sorry. It was the first real apology he had given me. But apology was not repair, not yet. What happens now, he asked. I knew what he meant. Would I save him? Would I offer money? Would I give him the house after all? For most of my life, when Ethan hurt, my first instinct was to make the pain stop. But Thomas's letter had taught me something I finally understood. Helping someone and rescuing them from every consequence are not the same thing. I will help you find a way through this, I said. Hope appeared on his face. Then I finished. But you are not getting my house. The hope disappeared. I held his gaze. And I am not paying off your debt. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, evening light stretched across the yard. Ethan looked stunned. Perhaps because after weeks of lies, pressure, and planning, he still believed the ending would be the same. His mother would fix it. I loved my son. That had never changed. But for the first time in his life, I understood that loving him might require me to let him face the full weight of what he had done. Ethan stared at me, as though he had understood every word except the last sentence. "You're not going to help." "I didn't say that. You said you won't help with the debt." "I said I won't pay it." His shoulders dropped. For several seconds he looked at the kitchen table. I could almost see the expectation collapsing inside him. Somewhere beneath all his planning, Ethan had apparently believed that once he finally admitted how bad things were, I would become his mother in the way he remembered from childhood. I would find the money, make the phone call, solve the problem. I had done it many times. When he was 19 and overdrew his checking account, Thomas and I covered it. When he was 24 and needed a security deposit for his first apartment, we helped. When Sophie was born and Lauren took unpaid maternity leave, I bought groceries for 3 months without being asked. Those were acts of love. But somewhere along the way, perhaps I had taught Ethan a dangerous lesson. Mom would always catch him. "I have savings," I said. His eyes lifted. "But those savings are for my retirement, my medical needs, my home, and whatever years I have left." "I know. Do you?" He didn't answer. "You were prepared to move me into a place that would cost thousands of dollars every month so you could eliminate your own housing expense." He flinched. "I told you I'm sorry. And I heard you. What else do you want? Responsibility?" His expression hardened again. "I'm sitting here telling you everything. That's confession. Responsibility is what you do afterward." He leaned back. "So what am I supposed to do? Declare bankruptcy? I don't know." He laughed bitterly. "Exactly. No, Ethan. That's the point. Neither do you." He stared at me. "You spent months trying to solve a financial crisis by rearranging my life. Maybe it's time you spoke to people whose job is solving financial crises." He frowned. "Like who? A financial counselor? A bankruptcy attorney if necessary?" His face changed immediately. "I'm not filing bankruptcy. I didn't say you were. I have a career. And people find out. People already know you sold your truck. That's different. Your pride is costing you more than your investment did." He stood abruptly. "That's easy for you to say." I remained seated. "No, it isn't." He walked toward the kitchen window. "Dad would never have let things get this far." "No." He turned toward me. For a moment I saw hope. Then I finished. "Your father would have stopped rescuing you sooner." The hope vanished. "That's cruel. It isn't meant to be. You think he'd be ashamed of me. I think he'd be frightened by what you did to avoid admitting you needed help." Ethan looked away. I softened my voice. "I will pay for you to meet with a reputable financial counselor." He turned back. "I'll also pay for an initial consultation with a bankruptcy attorney so you understand your options." Understanding an option does not mean choosing it. He said nothing. "I will help Sophie if something directly affects her schooling or basic needs. And us. You are adults." His jaw tightened. "So Sophie matters, but I don't. You matter enough for me to stop helping you lie to yourself." That silenced him. Eventually he picked up his keys. "I need to think." "That's probably a good idea." At the door he paused. "Lauren isn't going to take this well. I didn't expect her to." He left. Lauren called the next morning. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Ethan told me. I assumed he would. "You're really refusing. I'm refusing to pay $146,000 of debt I didn't create. You have money." I closed my eyes. There it was. Not concern. Arithmetic again. "What do you know about my finances? I know you and Thomas saved." "That doesn't make my savings available to you. We're family." "Yes." "What does that mean to you?" "It means I love you. It does not mean everything I own becomes a family emergency fund." Her voice sharpened. "You're choosing a house over your son." "No." "Yes, you are." I could give Ethan my house tomorrow. Lauren and his real problem would still exist. What problem? He believes consequences are optional if he can find someone else to absorb them. She went silent. Then she said, "That's unfair. Was it fair to tell Sophie she was getting my guest room? We thought you were moving. You hoped Ethan could pressure me into moving. That's not. You told me yourself you assumed he would convince me." Silence. I continued. "You're scared." I understand that. But being scared does not make my home yours. Lauren's voice became quieter. If we lose everything, will you be happy then? The question hurt. No. Because that's how it feels. If you have to sell a house you can no longer comfortably afford, you have not lost everything. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. Thomas and I had lived through layoffs, medical bills, and years when vacations meant driving to a state park with sandwiches in a cooler. We had survived without pretending appearances were necessities. You may have to live somewhere smaller, I said. Lauren gave a humorless laugh. So I should downsize, but you shouldn't. The irony was obvious. The difference is, I can afford my house. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen with the phone still against my ear. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired. But 2 days later, Ethan called. I made an appointment. With whom? The counselor. I sat down. When? Tuesday. Good. I'm not promising anything. I didn't ask you to. Another pause. I'm sorry about Lauren. She's scared. So am I. I know. This time those words didn't excuse him. They simply acknowledged him. Before hanging up, he said, "Thanks for paying for the appointment. You're welcome." It was the first help I had offered that didn't require me to surrender something. And perhaps that was the difference I had been missing all these years. Helping someone should strengthen their ability to stand. Rescuing them sometimes only teaches them where to fall next. The following weeks were quieter. Ethan met with the counselor, then reluctantly an attorney. He and Lauren began reviewing their expenses. They canceled a planned vacation. The expensive gym memberships went. They listed furniture they no longer needed. And Ethan finally put their house on the market. Not mine, theirs. Sophie came over one Saturday to help me prepare ribbons for the fall festival. She seemed lighter. Dad says we might move somewhere smaller. How do you feel about that? She shrugged. As long as I have Wi-Fi. I laughed. Then she looked at me. Are you still mad at him? I thought carefully. Yes. Her expression fell. But I still love him. She nodded. Both can be true, very often. September 15th arrived. I woke before sunrise. For weeks that date had hung over me like a threat. I made coffee and walked onto my porch. No moving truck came. No boxes waited in my garage. No retirement community expected me. My house remained mine. Later that morning, I drove to church for a festival meeting. The first pumpkins had arrived from a farm outside town. October was only weeks away. Patty handed me the updated volunteer sheet. Still here, she teased. I smiled. Apparently. But as I looked toward the festival grounds, I knew the story wasn't finished. Ethan had finally begun facing his consequences. What I didn't know was whether he could face me. Because paying debt could repair a balance sheet. It could not repair trust. And the fall festival was coming. The same community Ethan had once told I was leaving would soon see both of us again. This time, neither of us could hide behind the story he had invented. October 17 arrived beneath a sky so blue it looked painted. I was at the church before sunrise. By 6:30, volunteers were stringing orange lights between the trees. Pickup trucks rolled across the grass carrying pumpkins, folding tables, hay bales, quilts, coolers, and enough apple cider to fill a bathtub. By 8, the church grounds smelled like cinnamon coffee, damp leaves, and barbecue smoke. Patty found me beside the pie tent with a clipboard in one hand and a radio in the other. You look terrifyingly happy. I haven't had time to be terrified. We're missing 2 extension cords. Storage closet behind the fellowship hall. The bluegrass band wants another electrical outlet. Tell them Deborah has the power layout. The hayride driver says the backfield is muddy. Use the north loop. Patty stared at me. What nothing? She smiled. I'm just trying to figure out how Ethan convinced anyone you couldn't manage your own house. The comment caught me off guard. Months earlier, it would have hurt. That morning, I laughed. By 10 o'clock, the parking lot was full. Children raced toward the pumpkin painting tables. Older couples browsed handmade quilts. The church choir performed near the pavilion. Local farmers sold preserves, honey, and fresh produce. Sophie arrived wearing a volunteer badge and immediately reported to the apple pie booth. Remember, I told her no stealing samples. I'm quality control. You're a criminal with a plastic fork. She grinned and disappeared into the crowd. For hours, I barely stopped moving. A vendor needed change. A child lost his mother. One of the hayride wagons had a flat tire. The coffee urn stopped working. Every problem arrived sounding like an emergency. Every problem had a solution. Around noon, Pastor Michael found me near the charity auction. Rosalie, if this is about parking, talk to George. It isn't. If somebody has run out of cider, Deborah has backup. It isn't that either. I finally looked at him. He smiled. You should look around. I've been looking around all morning. No. Really look. So I did. Hundreds of people filled the church grounds. Children laughed near the games. A line stretched from the barbecue tent. The craft tables were packed. The hayride wagon rolled past with a dozen children waving from behind bales of straw. For months, this festival had been a date on my calendar, proof that I intended to remain in Cedar Ridge beyond September. Now it was something else. It was alive. And I had helped make it happen. You did this, Pastor Michael said. We did this. That answer is why everyone trusts you. Before I could respond, he was called away. I turned back toward the crowd. That was when I saw Ethan. He stood near the edge of the church lawn. Sophie was beside him. I hadn't expected him. He wore jeans and an old navy jacket instead of the polished clothes he usually wore to church. He looked thinner, older somehow. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Sophie spotted me. She waved wildly. I waved back. Ethan lifted one hand. I did the same. That was all. No dramatic reunion. No tears. No apology. Not yet. He stayed. I noticed him carrying folding chairs for an elderly couple. Later, he helped George direct traffic when 3 cars arrived at once. Nobody had asked him. At 2 o'clock, Pastor Michael climbed onto the small wooden stage near the pavilion. The bluegrass band finished a song. He took the microphone. Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment? The crowd slowly quieted. I was standing beside Patty. She suddenly grabbed my arm. What nothing? Her smile told me she knew something I didn't. Pastor Michael thanked the volunteers, the vendors, the youth group, the local farmers. Then he said, there is one person who stepped forward when we desperately needed leadership. I immediately wanted to disappear. Patty tightened her grip. Don't you dare. Pastor Michael continued. She organized volunteers, coordinated vendors, managed schedules, solved problems before most of us knew we had them, and reminded this church that service isn't about age, it's about showing up. People began looking toward me. My face grew hot. Rosalie Carmichael, would you come up here? Applause broke out. I shook my head. Patty pushed me gently. Go. I walked toward the stage. Halfway there, I saw Ethan. He was clapping. Not politely, not reluctantly. I was standing beside Sophie with tears in his eyes. For one brief second, I remembered that first Sunday. The fellowship hall. My coffee. Ethan telling everyone I was leaving. People saying goodbye. My name written on the volunteer sheet. October had seemed impossibly far away then. Now I was standing in the middle of it, still here. Pastor Michael handed me the microphone. I hadn't prepared a speech, so I told the truth. Most of you know I signed up for this job rather unexpectedly. Laughter moved through the crowd. I glanced at Ethan. He lowered his eyes. At first, I think I signed my name because I needed to remind someone else that I still had plans. More laughter. But somewhere along the way, I realized I needed to remind myself too. The crowd became quiet. Getting older changes many things, but it doesn't automatically make our choices belong to somebody else. I heard Patty sniff beside the stage. So thank you for trusting me with this festival. I handed the microphone back before I embarrassed myself by crying. The applause followed me down the steps. I spent the next hour pretending my emotions weren't sitting directly beneath my skin. Near sunset, the crowd began thinning. The pumpkins glowed beneath strings of lights. Children carried painted faces and bags of candy toward the parking lot. I was gathering papers from the registration table when I heard footsteps behind me. Mom. I knew the voice. I turned. Ethan stood alone. Sophie was helping Patty nearby. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked toward the festival grounds. You did a good job. Thank you. No. He shook his head. I mean it. You did an incredible job. I smiled faintly. Still think I'm exhausting myself. He almost smiled. No. Another silence. Then he looked at the volunteer board leaning against the wall. My name was still written across the top. Festival Chairperson, Rosalie Carmichael. He stared at it for a long time. I remember seeing your name on that board after I made the announcement. So do I. I was furious. I noticed. I thought you were trying to humiliate me. I was trying not to disappear. His eyes dropped. I know that now. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. He took a breath. I've been working with the counselor. I'm glad. We accepted an offer on the house. I looked at him. Really? He nodded. We'll be moving into a smaller rental next month. How does Lauren feel? Not great. That almost made me smile. But she's coming around. And the debt's still ugly. At least it's honest now. He nodded. That's what the counselor said. The sun was disappearing behind the trees. Ethan looked toward the stage where Pastor Michael had thanked me. Then he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I waited. He swallowed. Not the kind where I explain why I did everything. His voice trembled. The kind where I admit I had no right to do it. My eyes filled. He looked at me. Can we talk? I glanced toward the emptying festival grounds. For months I had waited for my son to stop defending himself long enough to see me. Maybe he finally had. Yes, I said. But this time, Ethan, you listen too. He nodded. And together, beneath the orange festival lights, we walked toward the quiet end of the church lawn. We walked past the last row of festival booths until the music and voices faded behind us. At the edge of the church property stood an old wooden bench beneath a maple tree. Its leaves had turned deep orange and several drifted across the grass as Ethan and I sat down. For a while he said nothing. This time I let him find the words. Finally he looked at his hands. I kept telling myself I was helping you. I know, that's the worst part. I turned toward him. He swallowed. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to take your house. I know that too. It happened one decision at a time. He told himself I would eventually want something smaller. Then he told Lauren. Then they discussed my house. Then they measured rooms. Then Willow Creek became part of their plan. When I didn't agree quickly enough, Ethan began telling other people I had already decided. I thought if everyone knew you'd stop resisting. The honesty still hurt. You mean you thought I'd be embarrassed? Yes. He looked at me. I used the church to pressure you. Yes. I'm sorry. I nodded. He continued. And the power of attorney. His voice dropped. I knew you probably wouldn't sign it if I explained everything it could do. That was harder to hear. So you called it emergency paperwork? Yes. And you told me not to read it? Yes. He wiped his eyes. I don't know when I became that person. I did. You became that person every time you chose the easier lie instead of the harder truth. He looked at me. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I needed him to understand. People rarely become someone they don't recognize all at once, Ethan. We become them one excuse at a time. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking about Dad. So have I. He would have been disappointed. Probably. Ethan almost smiled through his tears. Thanks. You asked. That earned a small laugh. Then I reached for his hand. But he would still have loved you. Ethan's face crumpled. I squeezed his fingers. So do I. He bowed his head. For a moment, my 42-year-old son cried beside me like the boy who once came running after falling off his bicycle. But I didn't promise to fix anything. I simply stayed. Eventually, he wiped his face. We accepted the offer on the house. We should close next month. And the rental 2 bedrooms plus a small office. Sophie complained until she found out the internet is faster. That sounds like Sophie. Lauren's still struggling. I imagine she is. She feels like we're going backward. Sometimes going backward is how you get off the wrong road. He nodded. The counselor said something similar. Then you should pay her instead of me. He laughed. It felt good to hear. What about the debt we're restructuring part of it? The attorney thinks bankruptcy may not be necessary if the sale closes and we stick to the plan. That's good. It'll take years. Yes. He looked toward the festival lights. I hate that, I know. But I think maybe I need to. That was the first moment I believed something in him had genuinely changed. Not because he apologized, because he accepted that consequences could last longer than regret. I guess you really weren't going anywhere, he said. I looked at him. The sentence brought me back to that first Sunday. The fellowship hall, the coffee cup, his announcement, people hugging me goodbye, Lauren smiling, and my own hand writing my name on the festival sheet. I was never moving away, Ethan. I know. No. Listen. He did. I was never moving away. You just stopped asking me where I wanted to be. His eyes dropped. I'm sorry, I believe you. Do you forgive me? I thought carefully. Yes. His shoulders relaxed. But forgiveness is not the same as trust. He looked at me again. That part has to be rebuilt. I understand. I hope you do. We walked back toward the festival. Sophie saw us first. She ran over and wrapped both arms around me. You disappeared. I was talking to your father. She looked suspiciously between us. Are we okay? I glanced at Ethan. We're working on it. She nodded. Good enough. Then she dragged us toward the pie table because apparently 3 slices remained, and she considered that a crisis. The months after the festival were not magically perfect. I think people sometimes misunderstand healing. They imagine one apology repairs everything. It doesn't. Healing is often boring. It happens through repeated ordinary choices. Ethan stopped using his garage remote without permission. Then one Saturday he handed it back to me. You should have this. I took it. A month later he called before coming over. Not because he needed money, not because he had papers, he wanted coffee. We sat at my kitchen table for an hour. He asked about the church. I asked about the rental. Nobody mentioned my house as an asset. At Christmas, Lauren apologized, not dramatically. She stood beside my kitchen sink after dinner and said I treated your home like a solution before I treated it like your home. It was enough to begin, not enough to erase. But beginnings matter. Sophie adjusted fastest. She decorated her smaller bedroom and informed me that losing square footage had apparently not ruined her life. By spring, Ethan's finances were still difficult, but they were honest. That mattered more than I expected. I no longer needed everyone to believe he was successful. He needed to become responsible. Those are very different things. One afternoon the following September, almost a year after the Sunday, when Ethan announced I was moving away, he came to my house. We sat on the porch. The maple leaves were beginning to change again. He handed me a flyer. Cedar Ridge Fall Festival volunteers needed. I smiled. They're starting early. Pastor Michael asked if you'd chair it again. He did. Ethan nodded. Are you going to? I pretended to consider it. I don't know. He laughed. What nothing? Say it. He looked at me. I was just wondering if they can handle you for another year. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my tea. For a moment I imagined Thomas sitting in the empty chair beside us. I think he would have smiled too. I had once believed the great victory in this story would be keeping my house. It wasn't. The house mattered. The money mattered. The legal documents mattered. But the greatest thing I kept was something easier to surrender without noticing. My authority over my own life. Age does not erase adulthood. Love does not grant ownership. And being someone's mother does not mean becoming smaller so your children can take up more space. I looked at Ethan. Maybe I'll chair it again. He smiled. Then I guess you're staying. I looked across the yard Thomas and I had cared for together. At my porch, my street, my life. I guess I am. Ket Thug Fan 15. The lesson I carried from all of this was not that family cannot be trusted or that helping an adult child is always a mistake. It was almost the opposite. Love matters enough to require boundaries. For years I believed being a good mother meant making life easier for my child whenever I could. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to protect someone from consequences they need in order to grow. Ethan was not healed when I paid his debt, because I never paid it. He began healing when he finally faced it, and I did not preserve our relationship by surrendering my house. I preserved the possibility of a healthier relationship by refusing to let fear, guilt, and family obligation replace consent. There is another lesson I hope every woman listening remembers, especially those of us who have spent decades caring for husbands, children, parents, grandchildren, churches, workplaces, and communities. Growing older does not make your voice quieter unless you allow other people to speak over it. You are still allowed to say no. You are still allowed to change your mind. You are still allowed to make plans. And nobody, not even someone you love deeply, has the right to turn your future into their solution without your permission. Forgiveness can be beautiful, but forgiveness does not require pretending nothing happened. Trust can return slowly through actions, and sometimes healing begins with one surprisingly small act. For me, it was writing my name on a fall festival sign-up sheet. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven Ethan? And would you have helped him financially after what he did? Tell me honestly in the comments. I read those different perspectives because sometimes another person's experience can teach us something we never considered. And if this story reminded you that your voice still matters, please like the video and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, courage, boundaries, and second chances. Wherever you're watching from, I hope you remember this. You are never too old to decide what happens next in your own story.